As you probably know, this is the third part of the shipping series, and both of the first videos were titled Roasting Your Ships. Under both of those videos, I got comments of people saying, but you didn't actually roast any ships, you just gave your opinions about them. And yeah, they're correct. I didn't really roast any of the ships because I also didn't want any pony to feel bad because I disliked their potentially favorite couple. But for this video, I think it'll be more fun to spice things up a little bit. And in addition to spewing some stronger opinions, we're gonna spend this video specifically looking at all of your self ships. A couple of weeks ago, I asked in a community poll what characters from the show you all ship yourselves with. And to no pony surprise, within 12 hours of the post going live, there were already well over 100 responses. And quick disclaimer before we begin, if you can't handle or are afraid of me judging your horse waifu, I recommend clicking off the video now, because there's definitely going to be some hot takes coming up. Here, I'll even add a link to another video of mine you can watch instead. Anyways, no more stalling, and let's take a look at what characters you're all down bad for. There was an interesting divide between what characters were mentioned in the comments. The majority of the characters were stallions, but most of them were only mentioned a couple of times at most. Meanwhile, all of the female characters were mentioned a bunch of times. And not entirely surprising, the most voted character is Starlight. If we're talking about post-reform Starlight, I can sort of understand that. She becomes this really sweet, friendship-learning pony who still has her angry moments every now and then. It seems like a relatively safe pick overall, but it's not too bad. However, there were two of you who specifically mentioned the pre-reform evil Starlight, and we'll get back to that later in this video. And to absolutely no pony surprise, I'm guessing, number 2 on the list is King Sombra. With how much I've mentioned every pony's favorite emo king in my videos, it's absolutely no surprise that I've attracted an audience with a similar taste. However, just like Evil Starlight, I will get deeper dive deeper into Sombra self-ships later in the video. I just wanted to have mentioned him here because he is still the second most mentioned character. And then lastly, in third place is Twilight, which, yeah, I can't say I'm entirely surprised that the main character of the show is this high on the list. But then, when looking at Twilight herself, like, really? She seems kind of boring to be around all day, honestly. Before she moved to Ponyville, she basically did nothing except study. And with how antisocial and anti-friendship she was back then, I doubt any of y'all would even stand a chance to get close to her, no matter how much game you think you have. Now, obviously, once she arrives in Ponyville, that becomes pretty much irrelevant, but she's still more interested in her books than any pony else. I guess that's some pony's type, though. I just don't see it myself. Besides Twilight, it was honestly surprising to see how little mentions the rest of the main 6 got. None of them even made it into the top 5, with Fluttershy being the second highest ranked. And yeah, I can't really argue with that. Flutters is a very safe, but still a really good pick. I wish I could say the same about all of the main 6 though. 2 of you mentioned shipping yourselves with Rarity, and 1 of you claimed Pinkie Pie. And personally, I'd rather rip off my ears than having to spend every single day with Rarity. I get that she's probably loaded from all her high-end fashion businesses, but even that wouldn't be worth having to deal with the constant darlings and crying fits whenever something doesn't go remotely her way. The same goes for Pinkie, and I've said this before, but I wouldn't be able to handle her constant, well, being Pinkie. I have to imagine that even when she's alone, she's still going to be jumping around being at 110% by default while and unless you're able to match her energy, which you won't be able to, you're in for a very, very rough time. And no, not like that. I was surprised to see that Rainbow Dash was only mentioned 3 times. I seriously thought she had a lot more dedicated fans. Though, I'd argue that Dash also falls into the same category as Pinkie. Not in the sense that she's jumping around doing a bunch of things that editing me likely had to censor just now, but more that if you can't match her energy, you're out of luck. And where Pinkie might at least try to comfort you or make you feel comfortable, I highly, highly doubt that Dash would do the same. Can't keep up with her speed? Tough luck, kid, maybe try Vapor Trail instead. Then again, I do think there are a lot more ponies out there who are good enough flyers for Dash than there are ponies out there who are as energetic as Pinkie. Then, moving away from the main 6, and yes, I know we've only covered 5 of them because, to my surprise, not a single one of the responses mentioned Applejack at all. So I guess we'll just skip her altogether and move on to the next best thing, that being Big Mac. Because, of course, the big and strong stallion was mentioned a bunch of times. Though, it was interesting to see the different reasons some of you gave for picking him. I remember seeing some comments reasoning that he's secretly a massive dork, or because he's a hard worker, or because he's really big and strong. And honestly, valid pick overall. The one downside I could have seen with AJ, that I would have likely ranted more about if she wasn't completely forgotten, is that she would likely expect you to help out with all the farm work and chores she does every day. But I could totally see Big Mac being much more chill about that. After all, I doubt he'd make Sugar Bell help with this part of the work at all. I know we're not like ranking these, but I definitely say Big Mac is the best option out of all the ponies we've discussed so far. And on the topic of ponies, there were only 2 characters mentioned that were a different species. The first one being Gilda, where just like before, I'd have to say, if you can match her energy, sure, that could work, but just know that matching her energy specifically basically just means you're a bully. The other non-pony on the list was Thorax, and while I can definitely understand that pick more than Gilda, the motivation behind it really matters to me here. Did you just pick Thorax because he's kinda insecure about everything and you have an I can fix him complex? If so, I don't think that would work at all. He'd be very appreciative of any help he could get, both before and after his reform, but he doesn't need a babysitter, you know? Plus, I think Thorax would be absolutely oblivious to anything romantic, because all he's ever been taught was hate and then friendship. So, while you might be helping him with ulterior romantic intentions in mind, he'd just consider you a really good and supportive friend. And now, I already mentioned earlier that I would discuss Sombra and pre-reform Starlight in a later point of this video, and I think now is as good a time as any. So let's move on to the section of this video that I would like to call You Just Wanna Get Stepped On. I'm talking Sombra, Chrysalis, Tempest, Nightmare Moon, the list goes on. These are the types of characters where I can only see 2 different reasons for wanting to ship yourselves with them. 1. You actually agree with their ideals and vision and think you'd make a good second in command. In which case, I kindly refer you to my video talking about how evil all the villains are, just to find out why that's a big yikes. Or number 2, you just find the character really, really hot and you want them to call you a good boy. There is no in between, at least for the villain ships. There were also some characters mentioned that I think fall into this category, but aren't straight up villains. A good example of this is Pharynx, and I think that most of you ship yourselves with him because you think you can fix him. And spoiler alert, both for Pharynx and every pony else in this section, you can't. There is not a world where someone as stubborn as Pharynx, who barely listened to his own brother and his entire hive, would suddenly decide to change his ways because of a random outsider. And even more so for all the villains on here that are just plain evil. I would love to hear a good argument or hypothetical in which a single pony with a crush on someone like Sombra, Nightmare Moon, or even evil Starlight would be able to convince them to change their ways. However, there was a single character mentioned that I think belongs into this category, but I don't think is that bad, and that is Limestone Pie. However, I also know the one pony who left a comment shipping themselves with Limestone, and if anything, I know that they're definitely... Okay, wait, for the sake of YouTube not banning my channel, maybe I shouldn't go there. Anyway, there was also a couple of people who explicitly said that they think self-shipping is weird and that they don't feel comfortable doing so. And that's honestly extremely valid too. It's not for every pony. And despite the signals I might give off sometimes, I don't actually ship myself with anyone from the show either. Though, if I had to pick someone, it would obviously be one of the stallions. So, as a fun little game, why don't we just grab every single stallion that more than just one of you ship yourselves with, and I'm gonna rank them based on how well I think the 2 of us would go together. The contenders are as follows. In order from most mentioned to least, we have Sombra, Sunburst, Shining Armor, Big Mac, Flash Sentry, Thorax, Hitch, Thunderlane, Double Diamond, Braeburn, and Sorin. So let's create a ranking and go through these from worst to best. In last place, probably to nearly every pony's surprise, is King Sombra. If we were going off of just looks, I would have probably ranked him near the top, just like I did in my Stallions video. But like I just mentioned when covering Sombra and all the other villains, being in an actual relationship with him just wouldn't be a very good time, I think. The number 10 spot is then occupied by Thunderlane. While he's a really sweet guy, as we see during the Cutie Mark camping episode, his original appearances in Season 2 really portray him as being quite rude. Faking being sick to get out of having to fly is hardly Wonderbolt material if you ask me. Plus, you know, that mane just really doesn't work for me. At number 9, I'm putting Thorax. He's a really sweet guy, by all means, but I just don't think the dynamic would work between us. He's got a bunch of responsibilities with ruling the hive, while also, like I mentioned earlier, probably being extremely oblivious to anything romantic going on. Then, in 8th place, I gotta go with Hitch. And before all the G4 fans start complaining that he's ranked too high and the G5 fans that he's too low, let me explain myself. I do really like how Hitch looks. Just for that, I would have probably ranked him way higher on the list. However, he has 2 main drawbacks for me. The first one being that his overall character is very childlike, not in appearance, but just in the way he acts. This is mostly just because G5 seems to be more exclusively targeted to younger kids, but it's still something to take into consideration here. But secondly, he has Sparky, and oh my Celestia, do I dislike that child with a passion. And yes, I know that's surprising. I know you usually hear YouTubers say the exact opposite and stuff. Anyways, while I'm already not a fan of Spike as a character, Sparky is just all of that but worse. The only reason Hitch isn't lower on the list is because I'm sure it won't be too long before he starts feeling bad for Sparky and sends him off to live with the rest of his kind in the Dragonlands. Now, at number 7, the choices are starting to become more difficult. All the stallions left are really nice in their own way, but I think Big Mac is the first to go. As big and strong as he is, I can only assume that even in a relationship, most of his normal vocabulary wouldn't go past yep and nope. Number 6 will go to Sunburst. I really like how shy he can get from time to time, just like how he is when we first meet him. Additionally, he's really smart too, having a near unrivaled magical knowledge. However, with how much of a hermit he is, it also feels like he'd have no idea what he's doing in a relationship. Plus, he also seems like the pony who would correct you all the time. Not as bad or annoying as Mudbriar does or anything, but it'd still be something that might get a bit frustrating over time. Then for number 5, there's another surprise, because even though he got 2nd place overall in the Stallions video, this spot will be taken up by Braeburn. My arguments before were mostly about how charming and friendly he is, but in the context of a relationship, I think he'd be really good at making sure you're comfortable, which is what got him so high up on the list. But beyond that, for me personally, I think he'd be too much. He's so hyper and overexcited all the time, which is really cute to see, but to deal with it every day, I'm not too sure. And now we're getting to the top spots, with number 4 being taken up by Double Diamond. While we don't know too much about him, he does seem like a really nice guy. He cares about other ponies, looks good, has a special talent for skiing, but is also a little bit gullible. He got roped into joining Starlight's village after all. Not that being a little bit gullible is necessarily a bad thing though. Now, I'm sure there are some of you who have already been yelling at me in the comments ever since I didn't put Flash Sentry in last place. But to all of you Twilight simps out there, just think about it this way. If Flash ends up with me, he can't steal Twilight away from you. In all seriousness though, I do get that he's pretty disliked in the fandom for how his relationship with Twilight was kind of forced into the EQG movies. But overall, he seems like he's a nice guy. He plays guitar, he's a royal guard, he seems like a real sweetheart. I think putting him in 3rd is a very fair placement, honestly. Number 2 then has got to go to Shining Armor. He's basically got everything that Flash got and more. Flash Sentry is a member of the Crystal Empire Guard, Shining Armor is the prince and captain of the guard. Flash is a music kid and plays guitar, Shining Armor is a secret dork and plays a bunch of O&O. I genuinely think he's the first character on this list that I could actually see myself being shipped with. Now, the one downside would be that he's, married, but I'm sure we can find a way to get rid of that problem. Anyways, as you can all tell, that leaves the number 1 spot for no pony other than Soren. And honestly, how could he not be? He's a fast flyer, just like I am. He's both pretty competent and a complete idiot, just like I am. And on top of that, he's pretty famous too, being one of the Wonderbolts. We would genuinely make the ultimate power couple, and that's all I have to say about it. Unfortunately, for all of those stallions though, I will never get together with any of them because of